Bitcoin is close to becoming worthless.
Let's go. Now what's the Bitcoin?
Bitcoin's like rat poison.
Yeah. Oh.
The greatest scam in history.
Let's get it.
Bitcoin will go to fucking zero.
Yeah.
Welcome back to another Confab episode on Ungovernable Misfits. This episode was with Seedsigner. We hadn't caught up for about a year, and it was a good chance to get into some of the topics I had on my mind and just to catch up with him. I always enjoy a catch up with Seedsigner, and if you haven't already checked out their incredible project, I would do that now. Jordan will link in the show notes some of the other episodes that I've done with them. Incredible project, great guy, and I think you're going to really enjoy this. Before we start, I want to say thank you to everyone who's been boosting the last Confab episode with Kerim. I have too much to say about this Confab, so I'll basically say nothing. He has a habit of that. He says a lot without saying a lot, but thank you for the sats, John. Late Stage Hodl, evil exists in the hearts of men, and Hillary Clinton. Chet, yup, good one. Deep shit, and I love it. LMFAO. Buy a fucking second mic, cunt. So sweet as usual. Thank you, Chet. Yeah, I will do. I'm going to be buying another one. Late Stage Hodl again. I boosted something here and it's gone now. It shows up in history, but not the text. If the boost anyway, that Hillary Clinton quote made me laugh. And my issues with Fountain continue. Okay, mate. Well, I have now booked a call. We're going to be doing a confab very, very soon with Oscar. And I'll ask him about some of these things and hopefully we can get it rectified. Fundamentals. Kerem was an incredible guest. I used to watch a lot of YouTube videos on people in K-holes. It's incredible to have someone come here and explain what the fuck is actually happening there. God bless the confab. Chad Farrow. Loving the episode so far, Max. Also, fuck war. Agreed, mate, unless it's on your doorstep. Winthrop, your description of people as little whirlwinds of particles that are shared and exchanged when we interact is spot on. Call it data, energy, quantum particles, whatever. It's very legit. It sounds like you integrated that experience nicely too, which is rare. It's easy to look back on it as just the drugs, rather than letting it inform your worldview. What's cool is you don't have to be in physical proximity to the person, so you can publish a podcast. You and your listeners are also treated to a bit of this exchange of energy. It's quite cool to experience this and be aware of it happening in the moment. Yeah, maybe we're all exchanging energy. That's what this is all about. I'm not going to read the rest of the boost. I think that's a nice place to cut it. Nice message. And I appreciate everyone who's been sending these boosts in. I do read them all. I appreciate them all. I just don't read them all at the beginning of a show, because otherwise we won't get into it. Before we do get into it, I just want to also say a huge thank you to Foundation. Foundation have been supporting this show for many years now and been building the best hardware in the space. I'm very proud to be working with them. They make cypherpunk tools for fuckwits. Even I know how to use these. I can keep myself safe and secure. And if you're thinking about upgrading your setup, or you're using some shitty hardware, or you don't have any at all, and you have questions, you can reach out and ask me and I'll go through it with you. If you haven't already seen these beautiful devices, I suggest you go to foundation.xyz and use the code ungovernable. That will get you a discount. These are absolutely incredible. I use them all the time and they'd be perfect for either single sig or to integrate into your multi-sig setup. Maybe you can even throw in a Seedsigner. They have Seedsigner functionality as well, so these things work great together. As I said, you have any questions, you can reach out. If they're very technical, I'll pass you on to Q, but I recommend these to all my friends and family. Enjoy the show. How about now?
You sound, I'm not an audiophile, so I don't have any good adjectives.
Silky smooth?
Yeah, that is the hi-fi.
Good. I don't know what was going on there. All the settings are the same. I just thought I'd send it through again.
Yeah, I can only hope I sound as good. I'm using my my LARP microphone that I only get out every once in a while.
What one are you using?
Well, once upon a time before Seedsigner was a thing, after I'd stepped away from the job and I was stay-at-home dad, I knew I wanted to do something, and I thought that podcasting might be that something. So if you're going to try to be a podcaster, what's the thing you have to do is buy some obnoxious, like large microphone with a pop filter and everything. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I did just that. Now I never use it.
Yeah, I did the same when I first started. I asked a mate who was into like all audio stuff, and I ended up with like all these different bits of equipment and mixers and different mics and all this stuff, and I didn't know how to use it, and everything sounded terrible for ages. And then I bought £100 mic, one of these Yeti Blue things, and it's just a USB mic. And it's not the best mic in the world, but it does the job, and there's no faff with it, so that's what I stick to.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Exactly. Well, mate, it's been a very long time. If it was almost anybody else today, I'd have cancelled, because I've been going for like 30 hours now with kids screaming in my ears for the last 6 hours today. So I was like, fucking hell. But I've been looking forward to having you back on and just having a chat, really. State of Bitcoin, what's going on with you, what's going on with Seedsigner and everything else. So I've made myself a lemsip, and yeah, looking forward to catching up with you.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm in the midst of, I think I'm a little bit further along in the journey with the kids than you. But yeah, my daughter is a softball player. And she has a game this afternoon, and the season that they go into is just like, it's over as soon as it starts. They have, I think, 5 games this week, and it's like a 5-week season, and then they're into playoffs. And don't mean to digress, but I do appreciate it.
What's softball? Is softball like baseball, basically? No?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So
I'm a Brit. You have to excuse this.
It is. You would, if you were to see a softball game, in some ways you would have a tough time distinguishing it from a baseball game. It is primarily a game that's played by women, or females, I should say. But in the 70s and 80s, softball was actually a much more popular game. There were more competitive leagues. It's like baseball, except the ball is larger, and so it doesn't travel, I don't think, as far. It's a little bit, I don't know, if you don't play tennis, you play pickleball kind of a thing. But I don't want to disparage it at all. Like, the girls that she plays with, and it's a relatively popular collegiate sport, and a lot of the girls that play it are really first-class athletes that have honed the skills that are associated with the game. So it's just a variation on baseball.
It's not like, because here we've got this thing called rounders, that generally the girls will play rounders, which is like, literally it's baseball, but just like with a shorter bat. It's like almost like an old school, like, police truncheon size bat.
Right.
But it's everything else is just baseball. It's exactly the same.
See, I wouldn't think that you had baseball or any baseball-like games there, but I would have been totally wrong.
We're sort of, you do, like, pretty much everyone in the UK plays, at most schools, like, it's pretty much football.
Right.
At private schools, it's rugby, cricket, and football. And then they'll throw in, like, a few other things. Like, a lot of the private schools, you can play basketball, but you've got to do, like, an after-school club, because it's not really, like, a sport that they generally play. Or, like, you can do baseball, but it'd be, like, something that you'd, like, do outside of school. But generally here it's, like, rugby and football and cricket is pretty much the big ones.
Yeah. Lacrosse is getting to be a bigger deal here in the States. Do you guys have that at all?
Only for girls.
Oh, really? So not field hockey, but like lacrosse with the net
Yeah,
thing.
lacrosse. Like, again, it would only be private schools who play it.
Hmm.
The girls would play lacrosse. It was quite a big thing. Lacrosse, rounders, tennis, things like that. And then, yeah, rugby for the guys.
I guess the only other thing I can say about softball is here in the States, it's kind of like a sport that is declining in popularity.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably much bigger when, I was a kid 20 or 30 years ago, but it's still a bigger deal in rural America as opposed to the more urban areas. So when you get into teams that, are from the country here, they're generally more competitive and they take it more seriously. So it's an interesting dynamic.
My read on Americans, because I speak to you guys quite a lot now, is that the people in the South seem to be a lot more like what people are like in the countryside here. So like city people generally in the UK, especially like more London-y types, are generally like quite rude and abrasive and annoying. And then the further you get out, either up north or into the countryside, people are more friendly and slow. I don't mean slow in a negative way. I mean like slow as in they just operate and talk and have time to converse with people. And they're not always like rushing. And they seem to have better manners. There's a lot more kind of like, I don't know whether it's because it's smaller communities when you're in the countryside, that if you act like a complete dickhead, then no one's going to want to speak to you again. Whereas in London, it doesn't matter because there's so many people.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some truth to that. It's like an urban versus rural sort of thing. Like in a rural area, I think there's still those vestiges of community being a collaborative thing to where, people helped each other get the harvest in, or if somebody's barn fell down, I don't know anything about stuff in the country, but I get the sense that there's a much more collaborative, like these people really do have a connection to a time, and it's probably still to some degree that they actually rely on each other for help. And so there's a natural incentive to play nice, as it were. But yeah, with what you're saying about Londoners, I think of that as like a New Yorker kind of vibe who.
Yeah. I think there's parallels there.
Not about New Yorkers, but it's just it's a different way of communicating that's more abrasive and more direct, I guess.
I hate London. I fucking hate it. I always feel like rushed and just like busy and crammed and
fiat.
Not for me.
So I'll ask, because I'm randomly polling people I know who are from the United Kingdom. On the outside, with the videos and riots and knife crime and stuff like that, like does that connected with reality at all, or is it just the worst things that are happening, or that's what I'm seeing on social media and it's overblown? You see all these tweets that like London is fallen kind of a thing.
Yeah. John asked me this quite a lot, and Mr. Crown and some of the other guys in the Ungovernable Misfits asked me quite a lot because they see the same thing. My answer is like, it hasn't really. I can only judge something through my own eyes and what I see, because I don't trust what the media shows. To me, I haven't really seen any change, any like dramatic change. That said, where I live, knife crime is not exactly a shock. Like if I hear that someone's been knifed within a very close radius of me, I wouldn't be like, oh my God. Like it wouldn't be a shocking thing. I'd be like, that's a shame.
What is the motivation? Is it primarily robbery, or is it like racially motivated, or is it, I don't know what else it could be?
I don't think. Well, where I am, there's racism everywhere, but pretty much everyone just like gets along. But there's a lot of crackheads and like junkies, and there's a lot of desperate people, and there's a lot of gangs. So I think it probably comes down to that. And there's also just like, it seems to be like quite a disenfranchised, violent youth, and I don't know how much of that is like culture through music or film or other things that maybe, for example, you have like, you go back like 10 years, you'd have certain gangs who would act or dress or move a certain way, and you kind of knew, and there were certain areas where you'd kind of avoid. You kind of generally know the ones that might be carrying a gun or a knife or something like that. Like now, all the kids, nice kids and stuff, they dress as if they are that. You know what I mean? Like,
no, I know exactly what you mean.
like if you said boo to them, they probably shit themselves, but they like trying to portray this kind of like this kind of look. But then what happens is I think anyway, like it escalates, is that then some of those people in those groups do actually start carrying knives, and a few of them are actually involved in gangs, or like they come from an area or like a background where they are really struggling, and they've had just not really like a great time in life. And I think a lot of these kids just don't really like see what they have to lose. It's just like a race to the bottom of like who wins is like who has the least to lose, because they'll just do anything. And like, it's, you know, around here within my dog walk, there has been kids under the age of 13 who have stabbed each other to death.
Oh, that's horrible.
Many of them. Like it's like everywhere. It's just, I just think it's like a bit of front, and then they don't really have anything to lose, and they think, well, fuck it. What's the best I'm going to see? Right. And then the only people they have to look up to, the only people who are doing well in their areas or in their lives, are the people who are like dealing drugs or whatever. They kind of look up to those people. So I guess it's probably kind of the same everywhere, but it's just like, it's more knives here. And it wouldn't be uncommon. Like if you have just like a car pull out on another car, mini little bit of road rage, someone beeps, you know, like for me, I just wouldn't care. I'd be like, oh, they've made a mistake, whatever. I'm not going to get angry about that. But someone will jump out with a knife and run across to a car. Like it's, you know, like they'll stab someone to death because they've beeped them.
Oh, gosh. At least with that, like, you know, road rage here in America, if it involves a gun, like you are potentially just trapped in your car being shot at least with a knife, you know, if your windows are closed, hopefully you can drive away.
Yeah, this is true.
But so two things come to mind. One is definitely, I think media plays a role for sure. And that manifests itself in a variety of ways. Like in America, hip hop culture has become ubiquitous. I think whether you're in a small town or the suburbs or urban areas or whatever, but then even in an entirely different manifestation, you see middle-aged dudes in their 40s who on the weekends, they want to buy a $30,000 motorcycle and dress up like they're in a motorcycle gang and, you know, go bar hopping or something like there's this, I don't know if it's like people are just bored with their everyday lives, you know, their job or whatever. And they have this sort of, I don't want to call it a death wish, but some sort of yearning for something more dangerous or something more exciting.
Escapism, some type of.
But then, so the much lambasted interview that Tucker Carlson did with Vladimir Putin, one of the things that Putin brought up that I think is actually compelling is the media, mainstream movies, mainstream music, the stories that a culture tells itself are telling about that culture and the direction that it's headed. And I don't know what Russian media is like. He's obviously, Putin's somebody who's talking his own book and is trying to portray his own country in the best light. But I look at the films that are popular in America, and it's hard to find films that you would be comfortable watching with your kids these days, you know, unless it's specifically like a Disney Pixar or one of the other studios that makes those. It's everything is just geared towards violence and sex and foul language and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I think it certainly doesn't help, does it? Like, especially when you're impressionable, like as a kid, there should never be a ban on creativity in any way. But it's like, I think it just comes down to like, you know, if you're a good parent and you have a kid, they suddenly start looking like, okay, they're doing something here that is like crossing the line where they're starting to become like is too far what they're doing. You might just rein them in a little bit. But I think what happens is like a lot of these kids, their parents are junkies or alcoholics. They don't work. They don't do fuck all. They don't care about their kids. And they then go and meet groups of people who say, oh, you can make a bit of money here. You're not going to go to prison anyway. You're too young. Like if you get arrested, like fuck all's going to happen to you. Don't worry about it. You want that pair of trainers? Well, we can sort that out for you. And it's just everywhere. You can see that like, you know, if you've got like a strong role model in your life, you'd go, well, hold on a minute. I don't want to be like this guy. I want to be like my dad. I want to be like this person I look up to who's like has a respectable job and like everyone likes them and they're kind to people, but they're a strong person. And like you have someone to look up to who's like a good figure in your life. But if the best thing that you've seen in your life is like someone who flashes a bit of cash and like people are scared of them. And that's better than like your junky parents who are just like complete wasters and don't care about you. You can understand why there's that draw. Yeah, in short, like I don't think it's worse. I just think it's the same. But I think it's just like there's a ratcheting of hate in the media. All this stuff about racist hate and this and that. Yeah, there are like things that go on like anywhere else. But like I live in a very, very, very multicultural place. I've never had any issues. Like there's never been an issue. It's just not a thing. You go to the gym, there's someone from every race. Everyone gets on. Everyone's fine. There's no difference. You walk down any street, there's no difference. Everyone gets on. Or they don't, but it's not a racial thing. You know what I mean? It's just like you have a problem with someone, whatever. I think it's like, well, if we ratchet this up, we can cause some more fear, which seems to always be what media are wanting all the time.
Yeah.
And then you have like angry, impressionable people who maybe aren't smart enough to like join the dots. And there's a lot of people whose lives were destroyed after COVID, and just generally just like the state of living in the UK is really hard. Like wages are very low in comparison to what things cost. The live to work ratio is really bad. And so people are just like angry, and then they turn on the news and it's like, we know you're angry because of everything that we've done, but let me just tell you, your mate Fred is the one you should be angry at because of his skin color.
Or because he's a racist, or because he's whatever,
Exactly.
thing.
Yeah.
What do you think about dual income households versus single income households? I have become like because I've had both experiences, and if you're a young person out there and you're just starting out with a family, or you're planning a family, if you can work it out to where only one parent has to work, even if that means sacrificing the kind of car you drive or the kind of house you live in, I think it's absolutely worth considering, because there are some things that you just can't put a price on, and you won't get access to those things. It's not any sort of knock on people who choose in a family where both parents choose to work, but I've been there. And even if you like your job, at the end of the day, like, we all need some me time at some point, and there's just no wiggle room at different times with kids these days, kids just don't have school and homework. They have activities that they're involved in. You got to run them into all that stuff. And it's just, you get a much more low time preference opportunity to interact with your kids, even for the person who's working, because they can, they're not trying to catch up on Saturdays with all the things they've fallen behind in the house and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. I agree with you. Like, that would certainly be our goal. I don't know if you know this. I've gone full time with the podcast.
So I did hear that in your episode with Zach. I think
yes.
I heard that. Yeah.
Yes. I would have spoken to him about it. So part of that was, it's not only like I want to do this obviously I want to do this full time, but it was also like I want to have time with my family. We're nowhere near a stage where like I'm earning enough money for us to be comfortable and only one of us working. But we're doing it just because I had some savings, they've been sold, and like we've given ourselves a little bit of runway to try and make it work. Because the simple fact is, it doesn't work the other way. Like it's doable, but it's not living. The way that we were living before was like my missus and me were ships passing in the night.
Right.
All I did was work Monday to Sunday all the time. And when I wasn't working because I was having to grab one of the kids while she, went to the toilet even or something like that, I'd be like extremely stressed because I'm like, I've got so much stuff I've got to fucking do.
Yep.
Then you feel guilty because you're like, I should be spending time with the kids and I want to.
Or you snapped at them and you just like, that's the horrible feeling.
Exactly. And so, in that situation, you're always tired. You're never providing enough anyway. Or I've never been in that situation where I can provide enough anyway. And you're not giving the love and attention you need. And you're fucking exhausted. So when you are spending time, it's not even really quality time. And you're feeling anxious and stressed because you can't earn the money. So it's just a lose situation. And I think anyone who's trying to juggle both having jobs and, can you pick them up after you've finished your shift and you do it? It's mayhem. And mine are young, so I can't even imagine how much harder it gets when they've got all these extra clubs and friends and mine don't do that stuff yet. They love like breaking my stuff and like eating toilet roll and spitting it on the floor. Like that's as much as like they love at the moment. They're so like they're relatively simple to manage. They're annoying and they're tiring, but they're relatively simple to manage. I can't imagine what it like, you know, when they get older.
So I actually, as I think about this, I think we've been down very similar roads. So in 2017, and I probably told you a story already, and I won't belabor it, but in 2017, I sold all of my Bitcoin, and that paved the way for me to step away from my career and be a stay-at-home dad. And there was a lot of pain associated with that. I think you've alluded to that too.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's a conscious decision, and Bitcoin is a tool. But I have to tell you, like my net worth would be wildly higher, obviously, right now if I hadn't done that. But I have no regrets. There's like I got to be with my children at a time in their lives that I'll never get to experience again, and especially during the whole COVID insanity. It was that much more steadying to have a parent at home, you know, when the kids are trying to do school from home and all this kind of stuff. I wouldn't trade it for anything. So I hope if that's reassuring to you in any way, I think you've made a sensible and probably ultimately a good decision.
It is reassuring because it is scary at times. It's more exciting than scary. And it's now just me adjusting my expectations of how much I can get done in the day.
Right.
Just accepting that like things are different with kids and trying not to be too much of an autist about it and getting too like hung up on little things. And also just like working fucking hard in the time that I have to make this all work, because otherwise it's, you know, you run out of choices, you run out of options, and it's back to the fiat mind. So I know how that is. So it's quite a good incentive to to do everything that you can to make it work, basically.
The hardest thing is like when you have things that you want to do, whether it's a fiat job or me working on Seedsigner, you working on the podcast and everything that is involved in that. Obviously, there are times when we have to have focus and be able to work on the things we have to work on. But I find myself sometimes slipping into this frame of mind where my kids are in the way. And that's probably, I try to catch myself as quickly as I can with that, because that's when I notice that my temper really gets short. And it's all about your paradigm and how you're framing the things that are really important and what you're working on. And yeah, it's an adventure.
It's a good point. Well, mine is now I just work from the gym. So I get up, I cycle to the gym, I work from there. And then when I come back, I accept that nothing productive is done. Like it's just, it's family time. Like there's no chance. It's why like we're recording now. It's like, it's 10 o'clock at night here because they're asleep. And so I have some peace. But unless they're asleep, there's nothing productive going to be done. And that's okay. Yeah. Talking of productive, with the Seedsigner project and working on that, I've seen some frustration recently. Zach's felt it. I've felt it. You've expressed it. What can we do to get you guys more seen and get a bit more of a platform? Because it's infuriating to see the lack of coverage. And I really thought like last time we had all three of you guys, we had Keith and Nick and you come on, and we really went deep on the project. And I was kind of
that was amazing, by the way. That was absolutely amazing. I'm extremely proud of that episode, and that's like I'll probably listen to that episode in 10 years and like be just regardless of where Seedsigner is, that will make me exceedingly happy.
It was great. You all seem to have such a nice way. Like you're very respectful of each other. You're very clear about who does what and who's good at what, and you lean on each other in that way, which is really cool to see. What I sort of took away from that is I was like, this is a fucking amazing project and team, and you don't get the coverage that I think you should. I don't think that it's ever going to be through the PodConf approved groups. How does this get some more funding, get some more eyes on it? I'm wondering whether there's like a different route, basically. And I haven't come up with it yet, but I'm wondering if you've sort of been thinking about ways to get more eyes on it, because it's a pretty solid, rounded thing now, like compared to when we first had the conversation.
Right.
And now we're in a very different situation.
Right. It's, I haven't figured out either. And I think there are some unique dynamics at play internally with our project that maybe it never becomes this. I always kind of operated by this paradigm that Seedsigner was going to have this aha moment where it would suddenly like click, like in the zeitgeist or in larger public perception. And there have been several moments I've thought where they've been big steps forward. But I think because it is an organic grassroots thing, as I frequently joke, we don't have a marketing department. It really is shared just one Bitcoiner to another, or one Bitcoiner who puts one together and thinks, wow, this is pretty cool, and wants to share it with his local meetup or just a few Bitcoiners that he connects with, he or she. I think maybe that's just the right way, and that's how we get there. And I have to take a low time preference sort of thing. When I first started this, sometimes you see things and you intuitively understand them, and then you have to, over time, back into the reasons why something's a good idea or why something makes sense. When I first had the idea for Seedsigner and saw where it could be, not where it started out, but where it could be such like it is now, like it's a reasonably polished tool that if you put it into someone's hands, they're not thinking, oh my gosh, this is this clumsy, janky DIY thing that I wouldn't trust with anything. It stands on par with something that you would pay to use as a Bitcoin savings tool. When I looked forward and saw what it potentially could be, I had this naive expectation that the Bitcoin ecosystem, as I perceived it, would somehow welcome Seedsigner with open arms. And it would be this thing that could be celebrated, if that doesn't sound too arrogant, in that we're really doing this for the right reasons. We're trying to keep the right variables in play. I've very intentionally tried to steer this as a volunteer, fully open source software thing, have turned away angel money early on, made it a point to open source, everything that was involved with the project. I think part of the rub was, I think we experienced a little too much success a little too early in terms of the exposure that the project got. And I think that set my expectations at a level that wasn't realistic, because as it grew, not all of the hardware manufacturers, but some of the hardware manufacturers, I wouldn't say they're worried that Seedsigner is going to take over all their market share, but it's not something that they're going to advocate for, and they might even take swipes at it when given the opportunity. So welcomed with open arms thing was naive. I didn't have any sense of the marketing cycle within Bitcoin and where the money flows from people who sell devices into events and podcasts and personalities with shill codes and all this kind of stuff. The incentives that kind of environment creates kind of tends to choke out some things. I mean, we have Rodolfo Novak routinely shits on Seedsigner. He'll call it Raspberry Pi, and he very rarely actually says Seedsigner. He just refers to Raspberry Pi. But even aside from that kind of overt stuff, it's sometimes difficult to get onto the main stage at conferences. There are just these subtle, it's difficult to get on, some podcasts that have certain sponsors. And it's a little bit, that's why I say it's just going to happen one Bitcoiner at a time. I don't want to whine about it. Like, we're continuing to build this because we're passionate. And like every time I sit down to work with my cold storage, I absolutely love doing it with a Seedsigner. It's kind of like other things that I've built. You build it because you're so excited to have one. And then, if other people can have one too, that's great. But I think that's the real reason why Keith and Nick and Gene and our other contributors do it, because they have goodness in their heart and it's something they just want to hold in their hands and have to use.
The thing that frustrates me is not that there are other companies who have a vested interest in not talking about your products. Like, that is something that I expect. But what frustrates me is like that it's not discussed more widely on more platforms, because it's not for everyone, but you don't know who's listening to this and who could desperately need to build one of these things. Most of these people are probably going to tune into what podcasts have got the biggest numbers. They might click on one of those. They don't need to listen to the 500th episode with Michael Saylor explaining thermodynamics. There might actually be a person who wants to actually use Bitcoin. And then they don't know that they can build this thing with off-the-shelf parts, which would be perfect for them. And they might never find it because maybe they're not on Twitter or, Nostr, or, maybe they're not really deep into this thing. And then they don't know that it exists. if someone just says, this might not be the storage that I use, but it's really, really useful, and it could be really good in a multisig, and everyone should consider it for those sort of things, that would be honest reporting. Honestly, I don't use a seed signer. I use a Foundation Passport. I'm happy with it. It's good. I'm like not that techie. I don't like tinkering with stuff. I don't live in too much of an oppressive regime where like I'm worried about something coming through the post. You know, I don't have it sent to my address, but you know what I mean? And it's like, I'll say that. I'm not going to like say I use things that I don't, but it's really important that people know that it's there. And that's what frustrates me.
I think the multisig thing that you touch on is going to become increasingly important over time. We are recording this week. I don't know how long it'll be before this airs, but this is the week when all the Hezbollah pager explosion episode is in the news, which is mind blowing. Just the scale, and that's a whole separate subject. But it's a pretty stark example of how supply and distribution chains can be weaponized to, in this case, attack people, but also potentially with Bitcoin to steal people. And really, the only practical solution we have right now is multisig. And it's my personal opinion. Your mileage may vary. My personal opinion, if you are truly using Bitcoin as your primary savings tool, and that is what you put most of your excess income in, and you're planning to save that, over a period of years, I think I would struggle to think of anyone who shouldn't be in a multisig. And the best way to do multisig is with multiple devices that are different hardware profiles, different software libraries. And Seedsigner fits into that as something that's a little bit different with different trade-offs than the standard manufactured device model. And I think maybe that's our sweet spot. There are a lot of other uses for a Seedsigner, but it's a great use case for one. But yeah, I don't know. Where are you at on multisig? Is that something you think that most people can get to, or?
I talked to Q about this the other day, actually. My main concern with multisig is still privacy, that you stick out like a sore thumb at the moment. That still is an issue, but I know that things will change over time.
Right.
It's certainly something that I think is, especially for someone who has a lot of wealth in Bitcoin, it makes sense. And it certainly makes sense to have different devices from different manufacturers or build your own and like, so that you don't have so much risk there with supply chain attacks or some sort of fault or bug or something. You're spreading your risk a little bit.
Right.
It's not something for me right now because of the privacy trade-offs, but when we get to a stage where that isn't a concern, I don't think it's difficult now. It's not like I'm not looking at it and going, oh, I don't want to do that because it's going to be so difficult. It's just privacy concerns.
Sure, that's fair.
But we're not far off, I don't think. I mean, I don't know how long. Maybe you have some more insight into it, but it doesn't seem like it's a million miles away.
No, I am not going to opine about that because I'm admittedly the least technical person in our core group of contributors. I think Taproot improves that a ton if I understand it correctly, but I'm not going to claim to have the definitive final word on that. What you were saying about the podcasting space kind of resonates with me in terms of I am fortunate in that I travel a few times a year and I get to speak with Bitcoiners who are in different parts of the country and different parts of the world. And I have been sensing this kind of growing weariness with maybe I haven't totally figured out the PodComp thing yet, like how much of that is tongue in cheek. It's a very unique brand of humor. And, and sometimes it seems like a little too funny, I guess. I don't know. But anyhow, just like with what's his name? The guy who now owns a football club, Real Bedford or whatever.
McCormick.
Yeah, McCormick. Like with him winding down his podcast, saying that he just felt like he was getting bored in the Bitcoin space. And so like when you have Lynn Alden on 6 times a year and you're in your 8th time you've had this person on, and usually every time he has a guest on, like the first minute or two, they discuss how many times that person has been on the show. In that kind of environment, I could kind of see it getting boring and repetitive to do that podcast. And that's what, honestly, a lot of the larger podcasts end up being. And it ends up being very focused on, macro and number go up and how rich we're all going to be. And I personally am just getting weary with all that crap. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah, me too. It's really dull. But it's what brings in the numbers, which is what brings in the sponsors, which brings in the money, and they can stack their sats, and it's all that stuff. But it is boring, and I know you've had your differences with them, with the Samurai, but I've had a real feeling since everything went down with them. I felt a real turn and a real change again, like a real ratchet up of the compliance, forgetting what we're here for kind of thing, and almost like an apathetic kind of, well, at least we'll be rich. That's kind of like the feeling that well, at least we'll be rich.
Right.
We might not be free, which is like what we said we were here for, but maybe we didn't really believe all that in the first place. Like maybe we'll be comfy enough in our Bentley. It will be fine. That's why I do what I do with John, and I do what I do with Q. I'm kind of never really touching on the macro stuff because everyone's always wrong on that as well. It's like, I followed that for, I don't know, 7 years or something, and like all these predictions, and you
get to the point where you realize they have a new prediction every other month, and like it just like I was in the exact same place, and I'm following like Lynn Alden and Luke Groman and who knows all the other people, and it's just like it's just they exist to attract eyeballs. I don't know what the business model is behind any of it. It's something about selling books and being on podcasts and conference appearances, and I'm sure there's ad revenue from Twitter, and who knows? I don't know, but I'm over all of that stuff.
There are still people in the space who do care about freedom, and they do care about privacy, and they do care about moving forward.
Amen.
You kind of have to focus on the positive aspects, because otherwise you do just go, oh, fuck this. What's the point in doing this anymore if these are the people who I'm going to be associating with? Because I remember coming in, I mean, I wasn't an early person. I wasn't like early like you or a lot of the other people in the space, but like coming in 2017 and getting to meet Bitcoiners for the first time, and like going to the beach retreats and going and like shaking the hands of other Bitcoiners. And I remember the feeling being like, oh, these are like really my type of people. Yeah. There was no flashiness. There was no mouthy people who wanted loads of attention. They were like generally just kind of like family people who really didn't appreciate people interfering in their lives and weren't that happy with overreach in any aspect. They just like, just leave me alone. Let me work hard. Let me look after my family. Don't come and interfere. That's all they wanted. They cared about freedom and they cared about free speech. And I just really liked it. It like really excited me to see that. And then I was meeting other people. I'm like, oh, they're really smart. They can do all this like clever developer stuff that I have no idea how to do. And like, this is cool. And, you become friends with them because you're asking them questions about all this different stuff. And you realize, oh, okay, they might be like super geeky and know stuff that I'm never going to know, but like they're really nice people. And so you make these friends. But I found certainly over the last like 18 months, 2 years, I don't want to go to the conferences. I don't want to like meet most of the people who are on these conference circuits. I'd never say yes to going and speaking at one of these things. I'm just not interested. Like the people who seem to be at them, it feels to me like, oh, I want to be like a little mini celeb. I want to have like a little following. I want to have like a way of influencing people and like extracting value from these people who I'm going to tell them there's this freedom technology because it kind of sounds cool and I kind of sound like a cypherpunk and blah, blah, blah. But like at the end of the day, I'm here for fiat. And then I think like, go and do a fiat job then. You're going to earn way more money. Like even if you have a really successful like platform or product in the Bitcoin space, it's really hard to make money in it. So just go and get a decent job and just like fuck off.
Yeah, it's So I am not super connected into, you know, the conference scene or the influencer web or anything like that, but I do go to some conferences, and as a speaker, you of course get to go to the backstage area or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it's having gotten a peek behind the curtain in a lot of these events, it's just been kind of disheartening. Because everybody who's in that level, who's speaking on the stage, not everybody, but most of those people are, as you kind of allude, looking to make a name for themselves. They're looking, you know, for connections to make a business deal happen. They're looking for their next podcast appearance. They're looking for their next referral shill or blah, blah, blah. But I will say, even at, I have yet to attend a conference where I have not been able to connect with really solid people once you leave the velvet rope area. Even the most fiat of conferences, when you connect with the plebs, that for me, I don't even like the word pleb, but I'll use it anyway. Like just average, everyday Bitcoiners who maybe they just found out about Bitcoin 6 months ago, or maybe they've been around for 10 years, who knows? But people who are just there to meet other people and connect and talk about this thing like that, to me, that's still just a magical experience that I treasure it every time I can get it. You Bitcoiners really are something about the incentives. Bitcoiners are really solid people. So I was invited to an island in the Caribbean called Curacao to do a talk a couple weeks ago.
Which island is that?
So
How do you spell it?
Curacao, it's C-U-R-A.
I'll Google it. Yeah.
And then put in C, but it's really this C with a weird squiggly line under it.
Yeah.
A-O.
Okay.
Curacao is off of the northern coast of Venezuela. It's a Caribbean island, and its closest neighbor is Aruba. And
okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Beach Boys song about what, I don't know the title of the song, Aruba, Jamaica, I'm going to take you.
I vaguely, I'm not a massive
so Curacao
fan,
Curacao didn't make that song, and I think people on the island are resentful of that. But
okay.
But it is an absolutely gorgeous island. They're connected with the Netherlands, so they're an independent country, but they're still under the Kingdom of the Netherlands, whatever that means.
Okay.
But they, beautiful Caribbean island. And the guy who invited me there is an OG Bitcoiner who, I'm not going to say too much here because I don't know how publicly he is with some of his details, but he was somewhere else in the world and ended up in Curacao for some reason. I don't know if it's because he, suddenly had a ton of money because he was an early Bitcoiner, or because he didn't like the place he was living, whatever. Anyhow, he's in Curacao and has been there for several years. And Curacao really punches above its weight class in terms of Bitcoin adoption. And if you go to Nathan Day's BTC map.
Nathan Day. Jesus Christ.
Awesome, dude.
He's the worst. He's the one who bullied me into joining Nostra again, just constantly bleating at me.
Again, had you joined and stepped away and then came back?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I got sick of it, and then he just constantly, him and Ben Gunn just constantly remind me why I need to be on there.
In the beginning, Nostr was kind of this echo chamber of how good Nostr was. But it's got, I'm not on Nostr as much as Twitter, but I'm increasingly on Nostr some.
It is getting better. I say a lot of what I say just to wind people up, but yeah, it is getting better compared to how it was a year or two ago. It's getting there for sure. Yeah.
But anyhow, this guy who's living in Curacao kind of is this one man orange pilling army. I think he actually has people that help him now, but there's a lot of local businesses. There was a grocery store near where I was staying that I went to a few times, and you can pay with Lightning in the checkout. And just here and there all over the islands, there's little places you can learn to windsurf with Bitcoin, or
nice.
This and that here. Beautiful island. El Salvador is an amazing place, but I think Curacao is this lesser known but gorgeous vacation spot that has some awesome Bitcoiners that I got to meet and sit down and talk to while I was there.
There seems to be a few dotting around. What's the Free Private Cities one? And there's a few different sort of like islands dotting around that are kind of doing Bitcoiny things, aren't there? South America.
Yeah, there are in other Caribbean islands. I admittedly, you know the places that you go to or you have occasion to learn about, and I just happened to. There was a connection between the individual that invited me there, in that his Twitter handle is BTC Curacao, and he created a Bitcoin cold storage tool that I used back in 2013 and 2014.
Okay.
Called bitaddress.org. And I think the website's still there. Bitaddress.org was this way to create paper wallets before hardware wallets existed or were widely popularized, where you'd, take an offline system, create private keys.
Run the mouse around like randomly, was it?
Yep, you've seen it, yeah.
I've used that before a long time ago. But yeah, another one.
Yeah, so he created this, and at some point in the last year or two, he kind of discovered Seedsigner, and I have always just felt a little bit of a personal connection to him because I think they're projects that are related and solving similar problems in a similar kind of spirit. So I was excited to meet him just for that reason. But yeah, solid place.
That's the cool. I can sound quite negative, what we were talking about earlier, and just like being a little bit pissed off with a lot of the space. But the positive side of it is, as you just said, like you meet certain people who are doing great things and they're welcoming and you get to see new places. And there is definitely a lot of that going on as well. And like you mentioned, Nathan Day and obviously Ben Gunn and people in the Meshtadel who are traveling all over the place, creating different projects, and we're all helping each other. There's always like an understanding that you can reach into like a Meshtadel group and be like, oh, I need to ship something from here to here. Can someone help me? Does anyone know a way to do this? And does it, people will always help each other. Or I need some timber. Okay, all right, I know someone. I need a welder. I need a software developer who can do this. And it's that ground level stuff that is exciting and like gives the hope as well. I just wish more people could find it, like I think that's my concern is like I feel like I found it easily. I don't even really remember the path, but I just remember coming in, very quickly found groups of people who were very genuine. And I guess my concern is just like, I want that to continue. I want people to be able to like see the real grassroots stuff, because I worry otherwise, if I came in now exactly as I was in 2017, 2018, would I still be here? I'm not sure.
They say the friends you make along the way are the real yield.
That is true.
I actually, we have a great local meetup where I'm at here in the Midwest, and I just, like with what we were talking about before with family life and stuff, I just don't get to go as often as I would like to, because they tend to meet on evenings and weekends, and on evenings and weekends I have sports practices and games to go to, and family stuff. So maybe in the next chapter, after the couple of these kids get into college, maybe there'll be time for more of that. But I relish those opportunities. Before we get too far from the subject, I do want to say, if anyone is curious about Curacao and what's going on there, there's a guy on Twitter called Joe Nakamoto, who's a Bitcoin journalist who was also there when I was there. And if he hasn't already, he was going to be releasing just kind of some interviews and some of the things that he learned and discovered on the island. So that could be an interesting way to get a painted picture of what's going on there. If it's for the more adventurous, if it's someplace they might like to visit.
It looks beautiful. I'm looking at the pictures as we speak. It's stunning.
So I will tell you, I'm planning, hopefully, on taking my family there next year. That's how much I was affected by the experience there. But like one day, probably the last full day I was there, I rented a car and drove to the beach. I don't usually rent cars when I travel, but I wanted to see more of the island, and it was just the practical way. And so I drove 45 minutes away from I was staying in the capital near like the historic section of town, drove to this beach, and the beach experience was so much different than the beach experience that I've had in the United States, like when we go on vacation to Florida or, Carolinas or, something on the Atlantic coast, when you go to the beach, it's like a public park. So you're lucky if there are some trash cans and maybe a porta potty by the parking lot kind of a thing. I went to this, they call it a private beach, and you think private beach, like, oh, it's not open to the public or whatever, but like you go there, I'm always forgetting things. I forgot a swimsuit, and you pay, I think it was $2.50 to get onto the beach. They have chairs everywhere. They have shade. There's bathrooms. There's changing rooms. There's showers. There's water fountain. There's a little gift shop. There's a place where you can rent snorkel equipment or scuba equipment. There's a full restaurant and a bar. Like, this was the first time I went to a beach, and I was like, I could actually see spending the whole day here with my family, because you can be comfortable, and it's not like when we go to the beach, it's like you have to bring your own water, you have to bring your own chairs, you have to bring your own shade, you have to bring snacks if you want to bring them. Like, this was just such an amazing experience. And the only other thing I'll say is I've never tried snorkeling before. Not like, we didn't go to the beach a lot when I was a kid, so I've just never tried it. And so for $8, I mentioned I forgot a swimsuit. I bought an inexpensive pair of swim trunks, I think for $15 at the little gift shop there, and rented, snorkel goggles and a breathing tube or whatever it's called, and went out there. And it took me about 5 or 10 minutes to learn how to do it and how to consciously breathe the way you're supposed to. But once I got underwater, it was like swimming around in like the aquarium at my kid's dentist office. Like the like Nemo fish everywhere, brightly colored fish, and they're all kind of circling around, rocks, and there's a little bit of a reef there. I don't know a lot about marine biology, but going underwater, it was like, oh my gosh, I have to bring my kids back here to see this, because I've never snorkeled before, and it was just, I get why people are into it now. It's just absolutely mystifying to see the schools of fish and how close you can get to them, and it was just an amazing experience.
I have to check that out. I do plan on doing a South America trip at some point in the not too distant future. It definitely is drawing me across. There's just so much interesting stuff going on there. It's beautiful. There's sunshine, and I think the draw will happen even more as we approach winter here in the UK, and it's getting cold and miserable. And I'm seeing these videos coming out of South America. I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll be getting over there.
Would you envision that as like a multiple country sort of trip, or do you have any destinations in mind?
Probably, yeah. I'd probably just go and visit people. I'd probably put a plan together of like, okay, these are the places that have been suggested, and try and make a longer trip of it. I don't even really want to stay in the UK long term. So I am, in the back of my head, always looking. I'm always looking like, where are the other options? But it's a big move with the family, and so it's kind of like it would need to tick more boxes than I've seen ticked at the moment. I don't want to jump out of the frying pan into the fire. I know the UK, it has its problems, definitely has its problems. The main problem being the weather, because it's so shit and miserable. But like, I know it, and I'd like, if everything kicks off here, I'm fine. Like, unless it gets really bad, I'm fine. Whereas like, you go somewhere new, you go on a holiday, it seems all rosy and lovely, and like you say, you see the fish, and isn't that lovely, and things seem good. But then it's like the reality of life kicks in. You're like, oh, there's no like decent school, or like there's, you know what I mean? Like there's certain things you need. So
yeah. I
don't know. I've always got my eye open, and anywhere with low taxes and more freedom is welcome.
So what do you think about El Salvador? Would you, is that something you'd?
I don't know that I really like or trust their top boy.
The country needs a bit more Lindy before I would consider, moving there or anything like that. It's just, you don't know what happens after Bukele, or if he takes a turn or something. But beautiful to visit. I can absolutely recommend visiting there. I've been there twice, and I would go back.
Okay. Did you go for conferences or?
Yeah. The first was in 2022 it wasn't the first one. It was the second Adopting Bitcoin conference that they had in El Salvador. Went with Keith and another guy who was collaborating with Seedsigner at the time, who he's more fluent and he'd been there before. So he had kind of like more on the ground knowledge. great experience. I have a little bit of a challenge in that we went there in the fall, and of course, south of the equator, that's the spring, and I have seasonal allergies that apparently are not compatible if I'm not medicated. So both the times I've been there, I've been struggling with like sinus congestion and inflammation. But the first time was that adopting Bitcoin in 22. And then the second time I went to Bitcoin Beach last fall with a group of Bitcoiners from Thank God for Bitcoin. And they had kind of like a private event where there's, I assume this is all still underway, but they were in the process of thinking about spinning up an organization that was kind of like Bitcoin for missions. You might call it like the Human Rights Foundation, but it's more focused on using Bitcoin as a tool to support Christian missionaries. And I've been somewhat forthright about my faith, but the weird thing is I'm Catholic and everybody else there was Protestant. So I was a little bit of this fish out of water. I never know how to approach that sort of situation because I know that some people who are not Catholic have opinions about Catholics, and but they were all very, very nice, very welcoming. It was a great experience, but that was my second El Salvador trip, which I felt was like a little bit more. The first trip felt like, because of the conference, it was very curated experience. Like on the third day of the conference, they had a guided sort of field trip or whatever excursion to Bitcoin Beach, and it was on these huge tour buses. And it's about I think it's like a 45 or a 55-minute drive from the capital. And you're going to these huge tour buses that are being escorted by the National Traffic Police, on their motorcycles and stuff. And it just felt like a very on the rails sort of guided experience. Whereas the second trip was more like I had a little bit more freedom to explore on my own. And that was a great experience too. The people in El Salvador and what they went through under the sort of previous situation there was just harrowing way to live life. And it was interesting because to me, it feels like in El Salvador, in America, there's this commercial that one of the presidential candidates ran in the 80s. I think it was Reagan. And the theme of the commercial was something like "It's Morning in America." And it was just all these sort of visual things of like people getting up for work and people getting ready to do this, and a really kind of productive environment. And that's the vibe that I got in El Salvador. It's like before, when the gangs were in charge of everything, people told me that there were like 2 hours a day in most places where it was generally agreed upon that you could leave your house and go to the store and do your business. But other than that, unless you needed to leave to get your kids to school or go to work, like you just did not leave your house. It was a very sort of captive environment. And there was this 2 hour window when everybody agreed that if we got to go out, we got to go out. We're all going to do it at once. And now just the number of construction projects and just the vibe you get from people there, hopefully everything is great with Bukele and it continues in a positive direction. But like people there are really hopeful and really just happy, genuine, caring, giving people, at least all the people I encountered. And it was a really good vibe there. So hopefully they stay on that course.
Yeah, it seems positive. I mean, it's pretty terrifying if you live in that kind of environment.
Totally.
Yeah, just worrying, I want to go out and get some milk. Well, I could be killed. It's not a great place to live or raise a family. So in many ways, like I find in the UK, a lot of people in certain areas have had it so easy that you have this kind of champagne socialism. They don't know how bad things can be because they've never seen it. They're like too relaxed. And then if you have someone who's seen how bad things can be, and now they actually go, well, we want to keep it good and we want to make it better. And they have a fire under their ass, like you'd be surprised what those types of people can do. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it plays out.
So in Bitcoin Beach, where I was, right next to the house I was living into, there was there's a vacant lot, or there used to be a building there, whatever. But because there's so much active construction, I assume that they were clearing this land so that they could come in. It's prime beachfront properties, so I'm sure somebody was building something there. But like, I kid you not, it's a rocky sort of terrain there. So they have just all these naturally occurring rocks that they're clearing out to be able to, I guess, pour a foundation and begin construction. And in another part of the world, like, this is something that somebody be doing with one or more like backhoes, or, they have some sort of heavy equipment there. There's literally a dude with one arm crawling around in the foundation or the whatever the previous building that was there, taking rocks with one arm and throwing them out of, the what looked like the building space into a pile so they could be moved somewhere else, I guess. Like everybody there is hustling and like just being productive. I don't know. I'm probably overselling it, but it was a great vibe there. Great vibe.
Well, that's good to hear. And I guess, people will flock to these areas. If it starts working, people will flock to these areas, and the most productive people will flock there. And it'd be interesting to see what can happen. One final thing before...
Oh, I cut you off.
No, that's right. I was going to say one final question I have for you before we probably close this out, because if I'm honest with you, I'm fucking exhausted and I'm probably starting to not make any sense. But I just wanted to have your view on the privacy side of Bitcoin. I know it's not your wheelhouse necessarily, but to me, it's really concerning. But then I'm in a little bubble of people who really, really care and take it seriously. It's interesting for me to ask other people, like, what their view on this is, because mine at the moment is like, I'm quite worried. Do you feel that's like an overblown thing, or are you kind of feeling a similar, like, there is a real issue at the moment?
So disclaimer, before I say anything else, is that I have always been preoccupied with Bitcoin's store of value, uninflatable asset sort of thing. I understand that people have privacy concerns, and in some ways I share them, but it's not been my mental focus. So my commentary is probably not going to be as relevant or smart or whatever.
That's why I'm asking you. It's like, I know you're not in the privacy bubble, and sometimes it's interesting to sort of look outside of like your own bubble and you're not in this tiny little group that's like obsessing over it.
Yeah. So I would divide privacy into two kind of different spheres. One is like long-term savings privacy, and the other is day-to-day, I'm trying to spend sats, transactional privacy. And there's obviously a little bit of overlap between those two, because sometimes you want to spend their savings and sometimes you want to move, pocket money into long-term savings. My impression of privacy with your long-term savings is that it's definitely possible, but the tools are not there yet. And maybe a part of the reason that the tools aren't there yet is because there aren't enough privacy conscious consumers and builders out there to make it happen. We haven't reached that like critical mass where it's a problem yet. Human beings are generally kind of a reactive sort of species in some way. We're not always good at anticipating problems and being proactive. We end up, I think it's because we're efficient and we don't waste energy on a problem until it proves that it's a problem sometimes. And maybe privacy hasn't been a big enough problem for anyone that there's not that critical mass there. And I don't really have any other thoughts about on-chain Bitcoin savings privacy, but on transactional privacy, when we talk about Nostr and all the little cultish kind of behavior there, for a long time I would always see Callie or some of the other eCash people making all these posts about cashew and nuts and eCash and all this kind of stuff. And I kind of understood what it was about, but it just seemed, I don't know, it wasn't my rabbit hole. And so I just kind of set it aside and was like, no, whatever.
It's custodial.
It is custodial, but honestly, I think custodial gets a bad rap. If you can do custodial in a privacy preserving way, we're always going to have the use case of walking around with, at this stage of the game, is $200 or $300, where if we lost that money, it's not the end of the world. Custodial solutions do provide convenience and an opportunity to onboard people in a way that is not like, I can't imagine onboarding someone with a true Lightning wallet where you have to open channels and explain to them that, like, okay, the first time you send money to this wallet, we're going to have to keep $5 or $10 because you have to open a channel, and that's going to take maybe 10 to 40 minutes. And once you have that channel, you have all the beads on one side of the channel, and so you're going to have to spend some or receive some to get the beads on the right side so that you can able to use. It's like we need stuff that abstracts away all of that complication. And when I was in Prague for the Prague conference there was some workshops, I think 2 days before the event, and I had my first interaction with an eCash wallet. It's actually a progressive web app. Anybody who's listening can go to a website called cashew.me. And when I'm trying to convince a bartender to take a tip in Bitcoin, or like an Uber driver, or in that kind of situation where you want to onboard somebody quickly, that website, that it's a progressive web app. And when you first visit that website on a mobile, it kind of, reminds you like, oh, you should save this to your home screen and blah, blah, blah. And, if you accumulate money in here, you should write these words down, etc. But I think it is up there with the quickest and easiest ways to onboard people to quickly get sats in their hands and let them start thinking about Bitcoin and experiencing what it's like to pay with Bitcoin and stuff. Now, the downside of it is you have two balances in there. One of them is Lightning and the other is eCash. And that's sort of probably confusing to people who are still learning. But in terms of an onboarding experience, it's awfully compelling. And like I said, I don't have a problem with a custodial wallet as long as people understand you shouldn't put more than a couple $100 in there. Like something, if you go to a meetup and they have a beer tap you can buy beer with, or if you go to a conference and you're going to be eating food, or if you're lucky enough to be in a circular Bitcoin economy environment where you can go to a restaurant and pay with Bitcoin, or you can pay your dentist with Bitcoin or whatever like that. But anyhow, what I'm getting at is, I haven't experimented a ton with eCash, but as I understand it, again, from somebody who's not in that world, like there's some pretty strong privacy assurances with it. And it is custodial, but I think it can be part of a tool set that is useful and makes sense over time.
I think that's fair. Q will absolutely hate me saying this, but I agree in terms of like small amounts is okay for custodial. Just like you say, like you have cash in your wallet, like someone mugs you, you're fucked. Like it's just one of those things, you lose it. I think my concern more is like not having the privacy tools that we had previously. It is an issue, like ones that actually work. And then culturally is my concern. It's like, do new people come in? Are they understanding the long-term play here? Because I've said for a long time, like someone comes in, they say, I don't like the government having control of the money, and I don't like central banks having control of the money, and I want to hold my own keys and have my own coins. And like, that's what I want, and I don't want it being inflated away. Great. Okay. Then they say, okay, I think this is better money. I think that this is going to become used by more and more people. And as it grows, at some point, this is going to threaten other currencies and threaten power structures that currently stand. And if they believe that, and they look at any history book, they might think, maybe I could be a target if this is successful. And maybe if I've gone and bought my coins on a custodial exchange, and even if I have sent them out to cold storage, even if I've done that, but I'm listening to every podcast and everyone just telling me to go on whichever exchange they're shilling, I'm not understanding that that is going to be tracked. And it's very, very easy for them to track it, unless I'm jumping through some fairly elaborate hoops. Are they not expecting a knock on the door at some point? Are they not expecting that they're going to have a problem down the line when their Bitcoin's gone to $1 million? They think they're a cypherpunk. They think they're going to change the world, and they get a knock at the door and they say, hey, we've seen this has come from this exchange. It's had one hop, very obvious. We're going to now tax you unrealized capital gains. If you don't give it to us, we're going to put you in prison. They'll yield. They'll give it across because they don't want to go to prison. And then we're in a very difficult situation. And I just think that maybe it's a cultural thing now where custodial wallet to set someone up is just easy, like whatever, for a few quid, whatever. But I just worry that we lose that kind of like, we stop looking forward. We stop thinking like, where does this go and how bad things could get if currencies fail, if Bitcoin becomes the world reserve and what people say like that, it's like, do you not think that's going to piss people off? I think that's my concern. Maybe it's overblown, maybe it's a long way away, but I just feel like maybe we're losing a bit of that like fighting spirit or like adversarial thinking.
I think, as with everything, like the truth is going to be somewhere in the middle. I think there's some aspects to what you're saying that are true, that we are losing some of that as Bitcoin becomes more mainstream. I think that's tied up in what you and I were talking about, the mainstream podcasts and conferences and stuff. I don't have a great answer. The perspective I have is that revolutions are instigated rather by a vocal minority. And I read a fair amount about the American Revolution and the Revolutionary period, and it was really a small group of the population, sub 10%, that was so upset with what they saw as tyrannical rule that they roused an entire geographic area to basically begin a war with at the time what was the dominant world power at the time. So I hope that as long as we do have that vocal minority who are passionate about privacy and are willing to talk about that message in a way that's compelling to other people and either build the tools themselves or find a way to finance the tools to be built or whatever needs. I do see a path to where privacy is more ubiquitous in Bitcoin, even if everybody that uses it isn't on the privacy train. But it remains to be seen. I don't know.
It's a fair answer.
One thing I wanted to make sure that I said when we were talking was to express some gratitude to Q and to Zach. When I was listening to the interview with Zach, I think somebody had prompted me, and every time somebody says something, we'll say it ungenerous about Seedsigner, I always get like 2 or 3 Telegram notifications from people that I know who are like, oh gosh, somebody, you got to go listen to this. Somebody just said this. And I probably gotten a similar notification that said, oh, Zach Herbert was talking about Seedsigner on Ungovernable Misfits. And I was like, oh my gosh, what do I need to be figuring out how to react to now? And it was an immensely pleasant surprise that he had a nuanced take that I felt was fair. And that was a refreshing experience. So for that, I'm grateful. And Q I've been in touch with him since the earliest innings of Seedsigner, and I've always appreciated him as well. And I know he's not with Foundation anymore, but Seth, I had my first I'd seen Seth for Privacy at events in the past and stuff, but I had the first 25 or 30 minutes just sit down and talk to him back in July in Nashville. And it was thoroughly enjoyable experience. I didn't really have any preconceived notions of him, but he's a little younger than me, but we're two kind of middle-ish aged guys who like to talk about history and have obviously similar interests in Bitcoin and stuff. And it was a great experience getting to talk to him on a little bit more.
He's a great guy. I really have a lot of time for Seth.
But speaking of those in-person conversations, is it in the plans for you to go to Amsterdam next month?
It is not. No. I actually went last year.
I know, and I was there too, and somehow we did not connect.
Yeah, I can't divulge exactly what my problems were in life, but it just so happened that I had some major problems, like really major problems happening just as I left. And then when I got there and I turned up at the conference, I got a phone call, which was an even more major problem. So my head was I was nowhere. It was horrendous. I did, a couple of drinks with Q. I spent the rest of the time on the phone trying to sort problems back at home. Didn't really get to see the conference very much. I'm going to see Mr. Crown, who I've been working with for years and years and years, and does our website and loads of the art, and he's a good friend, and I barely got to see him. And I was thinking, I'd love to go back. But then I realized I don't really want to go back because the actual conference part wasn't my cup of tea. It was only the little interactions, the little bit of time that I had was just chatting to people in the odd bar and a couple of interactions outside of the conference. But I have to say, my little bit of time in the conference when I went to go and annoy Q just for 10 minutes, it just wasn't, I don't want to shit on Bitcoin Magazine too much, but it just wasn't my scene. I don't think I'll go to any of their conferences again. Maybe I'll just go and lurk in one of the bars, like when one's going on or something. I don't know.
Yeah. No, like I said, the real valuable interactions for me are always with just everyday Bitcoiners who are there to see the sites and meet like-minded people.
You're there this time.
Yeah. And, I have to give Bitcoin Magazine props because as difficult as some of the other events and media actors have been to deal with, they have always been invariably good to our project.
Oh, well, that's good.
And I get that people get frustrated about the shitcoining that creeps in, or, they'll be talking about ordinals or that kind of stuff. And I'm in line that is frustrating, but I know, at least a half a dozen really solid Bitcoiners who work for that organization. And they've just always been very generous to both Keith and I in terms of giving us a platform to share Seedsigner with others.
That's good.
They've been really great about that. So I get it, but I'm a fan of theirs, I guess. I'm obviously biased.
Yeah, no, well, it's good. I mean, it's good to hear they're giving you a platform.
Yeah.
Maybe next year. Maybe we'll see. I probably won't go to the conference, but maybe we'll get a chance to have a drink, or when I'm in America at some point. I keep threatening to do that as well.
Max invades America.
At some point that will happen. Massive appreciation again for you and the team and what you're doing. And it's been good just to have a catch up and a chat with you, mate. I always enjoy just having a conversation with you. And we haven't covered too much of the Seedsigner project, or really barely anything at all. So I would say to people who are listening to this who maybe haven't listened to our previous conversations, probably go back and listen to that last one where we had the whole team on. I'll put the episode number in the show notes, or Jordan will, because I'll forget to do it, but Jordan will definitely do that.
Yeah.
Go and have a listen and check out the project, and we'll keep trying to get the word out and having these conversations and doing what we can, because it's important and we appreciate you.
I appreciate that. And yeah, I'm looking forward to our paths crossing IRL at some point.
100%. All right then, mate. Well, I'm going to go and get some sleep. It's been good to chat. Just stay on the line for a minute to make sure we save this. But yeah, enjoy the conference and we'll catch up soon. Thanks for listening, and thanks again to everyone who's been supporting the show, whether that's sending in sats by Podcasting 2.0, tipping us with Monero, sharing with friends and family, buying art, clothing, or anything else that people are doing to support us. It really is appreciated, and it's kept us going. If you haven't already checked out the beautiful website that Mr. Crown works so hard on, go to ungovernablemisfits.com. You can check out articles, clothing, artwork, the podcast, and much more. Catch you on the next one, and stay ungovernable.